Hello and welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Poetry Circle reading, monthly reading. Tonight we have a bit of a special program. Ordinarily we have one or two featured readers. Tonight we have a total of 8, about 5 minutes each. And these are all people who regularly have been attending the Crazy Wisdom Poetry workshops on the second Wednesday of the month. So without any waiting around, because we've got a lot to get to, let me introduce you to Kathleen Barrett, our first reader. Kathleen is a poet, artist, editor of publications Making Waves and Beach Combings.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I have 3 poems I'd like to read tonight. The first one was published in Making Waves, and it's entitled Letter to My Dead Father-in-Law. The farmland along M31, where Uncle Jim used to keep his sheep, it's gone wild. Thistles now fight for space among the chickweed. And further down, next to Pierre Marquette Highway, in the field where you used to rest on your John Deere under that old oak tree after you turned over that fine, damp soil, repeating once again the ritual of 7 generations, that sense of pride like Cain offering to a God unimpressed. It's gone feral too. I wonder now if this ground misses the care of your strong hands or rejoices instead in its own untamed turning. The next one I have to read was published, or is going to be published in Griffle this month. And it's entitled, And Would It Have Been Worth It After All? And it's for Nicole Bernadette Birkett. We boomer poets with our iambic breath will be gone soon enough. Our chapbooks dumped in amalgamated landfills. Seagulls picking at the ink, crooning out our rhythm. We fall asleep in front of blue screens, feeling the chill of having nothing more to say. But I wanted you to know. Once a woman stopped me on the street, asking if I was that poet who raged her into being. She said she loved my words. And the last one was published in Third Wednesday. Thank you very much, by the way. And the name of it is The Saxman's Tune #2. And this is for Doc. Play jazz, the boozy kind, the kind entwined in haze of cigarette smoke, which creeps in blue stage light, where the saxman blows out sadness and the drum beats a single rhythm, moving his riff along. I want to hear songs that I listened to alone when I thought too much and laughed at nothing. Let's both listen to the piano as it searches for a way out. I will be the smoke in the music, and you can be the last note in the saxman's tune. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Our next poet is Nicole Birkett, who writes, raises sheep, and edits Making Waves in that order. And you can find her at ludingtonwriters.org.
Thank you, David. I have it's a persona poem from my husband's view in the kitchen, published in Peninsula Poets in spring of 2024. Nicole, there's ground chuck in the fridge that's going to go bad if we don't use it soon. But I see you've used your toes to tease a pile of candy wrappers and dog hair from under the couch. You say you want to clean your mess before making something to eat, but then you find your feet left tacky trails of caramel spiked with terrier fur. Now, on hands and knees with a damp washcloth to dissolve the residue, you found a cotton swab I meant for the garbage, noting dog hair sticks to earwax almost as well as it does to sugar, and you need to shower. I could make cabbage rolls, but I think you like lasagna better, and so that's what I go with, pushing small boulders of sage and fennel through breadcrumbs, thinking about the Q-tip I forgot to pick up, slightly relieved you're back on the couch, bare feet under a blanket, smiling into a book. This one's called Bukowski over ice cream. I think most Midwestern children go through a phase of believing they like the taste of Blue Moon ice cream the same way you fall in love with Bukowski in your 20s. Maybe it's the hue, an oversaturated cyanide that, in wild combination with red and yellow, makes Superman, or a professor recommending you read Buke, rhymes with puke, because something in one of your poems sounded like it came dangling in the Turnifortia. Both had an adult flavor I couldn't place, something out of an old German woman's kitchen, old world spices and redemptionless fairy tales full of dismembered childhoods. I wanted to like both for more than just their color. Yesterday, I imagined it was cardamom, a bit of cinnamon, lots of nutmeg, maybe a hint of vanilla. But when I asked my husband, a man whose refined palate is especially sensitive after 10 years of sobriety, he took his time, let the spoon rest until a puddle formed, and breathed in the bite. I think it's just almond, he said. Burnt almond and a weird vanilla, you're probably getting marzipan. And those aren't flavors either of us are chasing anymore. And the last one's called Fuzzy, and it was published in Beachcombings. Thank you, Kathy. Just this last fall. My parents bounced us on legs both bare and unshaven, singing half-remembered rhymes from bumpy recollections of their own childhoods. My mom's ending in a stoner hippie's lament, homemade yogurt and a failed attempt at a sugarless diet. My dad with bleeding, sieving guard hairs from the goat's milk they'd used to feed us while he sharpened cutlery, both of them pushing us in the swing hung over the bench where they honed and wrapped the knives together. When I was younger, I wasn't sure if my father's arms, slick and shiny beneath the swing, were naturally hairless, or if it was the constant testing of blades running the freshly honed steel along his forearms, watching for hair to ping off the reflective surface. My mom didn't test those edges, and her arms and face and neck and legs were covered in a redhead's translucent fuzz. And her husband's calves were also smooth. He says it's years of high compression socks, shifting back and forth against legs that swell under 12 hours, standing in front of a wheel of bonded emery, spinning at 67 miles per hour, making keen what's bone chipped and flesh dulled. But my mom stood with him and stayed fuzzy, and while the hair on his head is dark and gray, what's shaved away at Stony Lake Cutlery is a soft yellow he remembers from a painted fifth-grade graduation picture in a frame on his bedside table, sitting opposite a First Communion photo of my mother, whose black horn-rimmed glasses are interrupted by a frizz of bright curls.
Thank you, Nicole. Our next poet is Shutta Crum. Shutta is a well-published poet, celebrated children's author, and you can find her at www.shutta.com. Shutta Crum.
Hi, I am going to read two poems from the book Leslie said she read earlier, was reading. This is my latest volume of poetry. It's called Meet Me Out There. There are two very different poems in terms of mood, sensibility. This first one is called God's Second Thought. What the hell do I do with this rib? I imagine God said something like that as Adam lay bleeding at his feet. Perhaps the Almighty, momentarily startled, waved the rib about, hoping for a quick idea. Perhaps he flung it as the first boomerang and found it was wayward, falling defiantly and knocking an apple from a tree. Perhaps, having retrieved the rib, he stood glorious in a shaft of light and saw how elegant, how smooth it was, how strong, and yet how fragile. Perhaps Adam groaned while clutching his side and disturbed God's godly thoughts. Then the Holy One had a second idea about mankind. Why not a helpmate? Someone to nurse that first one, to stop his bleeding. And while he was at it, why not someone to rub his own haggard back? Someone to tell him what to do when he got lost in his thoughts? And what with all those heavy dinosaurs and frantic amoebas mucking about? Certainly, The Alpha and the Omega could use someone to tell Adam to get over it. So God slid heavenly fingers along that shapely bone and declared, "Of course, I'll create Eve." Later, his work done, the Divine One likely trotted home with a good dog for company, thinking, surely there'd be a hot meal and maybe even a warm piece of pie waiting, made by that latest lovely human. Finally, I imagine God coming into his house and stopping on the rug to wipe the nasty things he'd created off his shoes. Perhaps Adam limps in after, and the two of them stare at the empty plates, the can of beans, the can opener on the countertop, and at the apple on the table, half eaten. I like reading that one. It's always a fun one to read. The second one is very, very different mood, much more serious. Hope it doesn't make you cry. Leslie said she was crying earlier. This is a poem called Make Bread. Sprinkle a few tears on some yeast and let it proof. Then get out the stainless steel bowl you took from your mother's house after she died. It's dented and cold to the touch. Dump in 4 cups of unbleached memory, the sweetness of summer apples, autumn rain, and the warmth of an evening fire. Whisk together until you see your mother eating an apple or standing lovely by a bonfire in the rain. Cut in a bit of her laughter until pea-sized. In a smaller bowl, temper your thoughts with clarified moments. Did she hold you when your dog Bugsy died? Did you once see her kissing the neighbor? Make a well in your memories. Pour in your thoughts. Leaven honestly with the yeast you proofed. Mix until it comes together large and heavy, and you can barely lift it. Now turn it out onto a surface dusted with words you wish you'd spoken. Need recalling the baseball games she never came to, the school play she couldn't be bothered with. Let it rise until doubled, then punch it down, let it rest. Go outside, breathe in the air scented with winter, wander a while remembering the fragrance of apples. Return to the dough and tuck the troubled edges under. Shape it in a way that pleases you, the way you tucked blankets around her that autumn when it rained and she slipped away. Let it all rise again, then bake it in the oven of your heart. Pair this with a good Zinfandel, one with a complex bouquet and undernotes of regret. Thanks.
Thank you, Shutta. My pleasure next is to introduce our next poet, who is me. I'm David Jibson. I'm the editor of Third Wednesday Magazine, one of the CW Poetry Circle coordinators here. And I'm going to begin this evening reading 3 short poems of a Korean form. Not a lot of people know. It's called a sijo, translates as short song. I did a deep dive into writing sijo about a year ago, and here are 3 of the results. I've had a number of these published. December. The long night moon has come, and I struggle to finish this poem. She closes her book and heads up the stairs without a word. Embers in the fireplace have gone cold, like those of a marriage. On a long drive. On a long drive, I sometimes imagine you sitting next to me. I look at you in the passenger seat, and you are young again. You look over at me, and you say, "How long until we're home?" Midnight snow. It's been falling since morning, weighing down the branches of the trees. I carry in an armload of seasoned oak for the wood stove. Our shadow puppets begin their dance across the kitchen ceiling. Next, I'm going to read a poem called The Canals of Mars. Back in the last century, maybe 2 centuries ago now, we thought Mars had people living on it and that they made canals. Due to a mistranslation of a book by Sir Percival Lowell. So anyway, The Canals of Mars. Oh, it was originally published in Apex magazine, which is a science fiction magazine. I don't think they publish poetry anymore. The Canals of Mars. How glorious the canals of Mars, as Percival Lowell described them. How dry the red Martian desert. How welcome the relief of water pouring from the polar ice caps, flowing like life's own blood through the arteries and veins over the surface of the warrior planet. And where they intersect, a sprawling city of crystal towers, home to the great university where once a year in Martian summer, great minds gather to debate the theory that there could be life on Earth. Too close to the sun's deadly heat, the philosopher scientist says. How could it be? Too wet and the air too heavy to breathe, argue the philosopher physicians. Nothing could live in those conditions. Even if life could exist there, argues the philosopher poet, how could one write music or poetry or fall in love under the influence of a single moon? And I'm going to close with a really short poem, just 9 lines. Birds of Morris Graves. It's an ekphrastic poem. Birds of Morris Graves. It was originally published in Ekphrastic Review. Oh, these are not the pretty painted lovers of Audubon, but spirit birds of nature that seek to nest in that wounded wilderness of the inner eye, maddened by the sound of machinery and logged-off mountains, myths of division and separation, Taoist owls in times of change, moonbirds with their haunted bouquets, singing in the next dimension. And that's it for me. Thank you all for listening. And we're next going to go to one of our newer members, Marland Lloyd. Marland, make sure you're unmuted.
I am.
Away.
Thanks, David. I'm an old man, but I'm a new poet. My first poem was written about 18 months ago or so, and this is one of the first. It has been reviewed by my friends at the Crazy Wisdom Workshop. My second poem is fresh, and they're both about journeys. So the first one, on our way home. The path is muddy today, so only a few have passed by. They've left behind their marks. There's the print of some young athlete striding long and purposeful, certain and secure in his destination and the outcome. An older woman has walked here, her stride wavering, unsteady, the imprint of her cane like some terminal mark of punctuation in the soil at her feet. She's brought along her little dog, whose prints, at once regular and curious, inquire of a broken branch and seek out scent beyond our capacity to know. Some child has walked barefoot in the path, mud scrunching up between toes in playful embrace with all that is spontaneous and innocent. There, a young couple has stood, gazing at one another, steps conjoined in momentary pause, her feet between his, arm about arm in loving surrender, heart to heart as others pass. I know. Tomorrow's rain will wash away footsteps on the path, signs that they walked here. All will be gone. But for the moment, at least, I know others have walked with me on our way home. The second poem, as I said, is newer, deals with a journey as well, and it's much more literary in its aspirations. And this is called Surrendering to the Siren's Song. We hear the siren's song, enticing, melodious, We resist its call. We wrap ourselves around the mast because we conjure places to be, duties to perform before end of day. We convince ourselves there is no time to swim ashore, to take up arms under ochre skies, to spill the sand in time's hourglass. We heed Circe's warning as if she knows the risk. We only pretend to reason where we go. We pretend to a purpose leading home, a memory that must be purified before we depart again on a stranger's quest. Here is no melodious peace, no timeless serenity. So what if we respond to the siren's song? What if we wade ashore amidst swirling currents, brave the perils of unseen rocks below the surface of things? What if we lose ourselves and find new life? Rather than fight some hero's war before the walls of Troy, might we draw swords where sirens dwell, run the risk of loss? Might we listen to the sound of honeybees gathering nectar from the jonquil's lips? Might we join the musings of winter's ice before the coming thaw cracks open to water below? Might we make time to sing with trees a harmony of russet and gold and crimson suspended in air before the bent autumn light? The sirens, they call. We stuff our ears with cotton to shut out time's temptations, but lose as well moments of life's sweet soundings. And why? Perhaps we fear to come ashore, to forsake the voyage we know, the ending place we long for. And so we discover the paradox. We might usurp the siren's song and sing our own natural harmony, but only if we cut the fetters keeping us on course, condemned to sail endless on soundless seas, crossing off our days on the celestial calendar hung on God's kitchen wall. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. I failed to mention, because I got a little excited, Mark is a PhD English teacher and administrator and is inspired by national parks. Our next reader is Christian Michael. Christian, make sure you're unmuted. And the only thing I can say about Christian, because I didn't get a bio about him, he works for somebody and they pay him for doing something. But Christian, you take it from there.
That is true. Thanks, David. So as he said, I'm Christian. I've written for poetry for about 3 years now. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in mathematical biology. I'll be reading a handful of mostly persona poems about my experiences prior to and during my PhD training, particularly the spiraling anxiety consequence to internalized expectations, systemic pressure, and isolation. An academic sibling of mine is actually here tonight. My first poem is The Summoning. Rejoice, for we have found the child suitable to pull greatness into our tomorrow. He is the one with such grand potential. See how his play evokes shimmering trails? We are so happy to have found him, the one who is born to bring us something so much greater. Each time he displays cultivatable promise in that frail, lazy body. We'll fix that. He reminds us that there is some hope that we might groom the golden child. So let us begin. You're so bright. You have such potential. If only you cared a bit more. Apply yourself. What's the problem? If only you wanted it more. What's wrong with you? Aren't you smart? If only you'd buckle down more. From deep in the pit, this drags up a tadpole, dripping with smoke and writhing in cold. The boy didn't notice, burrow it and dig from our hands into his brain. He sings with us now. I'm so bright. I have such potential. If only I cared a bit more. I'm not applied. What's my problem? If only I wanted a bit more. What's wrong with me? Am I not smart? I promise you that I'll try even more. The second poem is The Sculptor and the Assistant in the Workshop. I watched with guilt and sympathy as he led another subject to its chair, red-padded and cracked from sun-soaked age. As per protocol, we ignored its words after it was graded as worthy. Once bound, he placed a soundproof mask over its face. I could still see the fear in its eyes. As always, I feel the echoes. I feel the echoes of its fear in myself. Have I chosen well? Have I left too much behind? Can I finally be transformed into something right and proper? He enters its skull with effortless practice ease, demonstrating his terrible gift. He wears nitrile gloves for his safety and hygiene. We apply the classic remedy, bottled fear that fuels wind-up light nightmares. It holds its breath while he winds its key until it strains and groans and shakes. I hold its hand. He leaves it in agony for twice the standard time because he's distracted by something more important. It writhes so I feel it might break. Because I hear my own wind-up ticking still. He muses again how my ascension went well and how this one is promising, and hopes it won't end up on the heap of defects. I must admit his skill in bending and torquing and breaking and shaping are considerable. Few see the rejects in daylight. They're cleaned out during the night. Third, I have one called Mirror Image. I surround myself with perfect mimics of what I might look like or who I might be. Will I reveal by a single misstep that I'm as hollow as I know them to be? Sometimes I speak as them, as tactless or as stupid, or as simple and tasteless as a parlor illusion. Can I still tell who's the hollow one and who's empty? If not, then I know I've mastered the spell. Next, I've got one more called Crystal Ball. You learn the basics early on in life. When chained to your chair and forced to gaze, the cloudy mass within begins to dance like contorted intestines rejecting an insult. It starts to fold and pull and tease and shift, first white and then red and again and again. Hypnotic patterns lance into your eyes, 1,000 ways you meet your death. Yet only one has the hope to save your life. A long, thin wire rife with hurdles. This is the future you've learned to expect, further and further into the distance, a life in chain to save you from those fates, the 10,000 ways you meet your death. Your human eyes are easy to forget, and old chains are brittle, but you are your own key. If you dare to relinquish divination, these visions recede in the crystal cracks and shows you just the table set before you. And through the clear ball, you might yet see, for the first time in decades, the still empty room you've been in, where the light from the window casts a square on the floor. There, the dust dances, folds, and shifts. As my final poem, the short one, called The Tower. The skyline's silence is lacerated by bells. The clock in the tower is always well wound. The road through the forest is posted with signs, hand-carved and nailed to the trees. The tower can only be found in the moments when the forest becomes silent, is silent. Its stones were laid with a particular haphazardness. Lumber was warped to serve this architecture. Greetings extend from the spear points of statues. Its resplendent foyer is covered in dust. The carpet's pattern clashes with its embroidery. A stairwell spirals from deep underground. The door on each landing is polished, untouched. Above, a feast awaits your arrival, maintained vigilantly in the banquet hall. Piles of seasoned grilled peppers, a cauldron of lamb stew, and florets of ostrich meat and cheese. Candles burn low within mountains of wax. I continue to wind the clock. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christian. Next, I want to welcome to the mic Ed Morin, one of our Crazy Wisdom coordinators. Ed?
Thank you.
And Ed is a published poet, songwriter, translator, editor, and a university teacher. Ed, take it away.
This is a summertime poem, and it was first published in Peninsula Poets, and then in my third collection of poems, The Bold News of Bird Calls. It's about a bank swallow, or about bank swallows who catch insects on the wing and make their nests in high sandbanks. Bank swallows are black-winged acrobats, flitting over sage and juniper. Their white throats fill with gnats and flies they catch all day above the bright, hot dunes of Lake Huron. While siskins hide in cool pines and preening kingbirds avoid the hunt, two of these magnificent tricksters squeak, blank, and sally like bats raiding the beach where we swimmers lie like fossils. They take turns plunging scissor-tailed. Now you see me, now you don't, in under the crest of a sand cliff, staying buried just long enough to feed the young without breathing much air inside, then catapult out into the blue sky. Remember, love, our, uh, our barefooted climb in dry roots, thin as air, up the sliding steep sand hill. The nest's double doors are two holes shaped like half-closed eyes. Too small to get a hand through. The mates flutter and scold above us, flashing sharp wings in the burning sun, throwing shadows the size of hawks. Our talk is being heard in somebody else's home. Everybody is scared. The next is a fall poem, and it is particularly apropos to this season, to this fall. Coasting in November. Local legend has it that the street where I live is paved over a creek. It meanders like ground ivy down into a floodplain. I was raking leaves when a man pushing his bicycle rounded the steep corner, mounted, and coasted slowly toward me. Hatless, grizzled hair unkempt, he wore a battered jacket and jeans. A large backpack and black trash bag, which may have contained all his worldly possessions, were lashed above the wheels of the bike. The rider strained to keep balance. And then his lined face softened in a smile. Beside the curb, I leaned on my rake and smiled back, hinting my readiness to have a pleasant conversation, the perfect Frostian moment for sharing bromide bits of wisdom, maybe a joke. He looked willing to stop, but as the bike gained momentum, he rolled past, bellowing, "All I can say is, thanks to God for downhills." I felt a rush of disappointment that we couldn't pass the time of day. With cargo like the house on a snail's back, the bike held course on the serpentine road, disappearing among orange maples and crimson oaks. I resumed raking and meditated long on the ways each of us might be coasting downhill. The next is about someone whom the whole world seems focused on right now. The would-be tyrant. Too much ink and blather have been spent on you-know-who. One faction believes he's a demigod, while their opponents write him off as the arch narcissist. He started out as infotainment, amusing us with alternative facts, but morphed into a serious federal problem when he denied massive evidence showing he fell short of re-election. The root of his trouble is contempt for the principle of contradiction. Anyone, from a curious toddler to a slow octogenarian, knows a thing can't simultaneously be and not be. If I say the dog has fleas, it's illogical for me to say the dog does not have fleas. A mother says, "You can't go outside when it's raining." Junior says, "It's not raining." Watching rain, she tells him, "Look out the window." What quirk in upbringing causes this man to deny facts which do not serve his interests? Amazing how he lures others into the darkened cave of his solipsism. The ex-leader's grandiose claims exceeds that of grandiose claim exceeds that made for the Titanic. Once the liner sank to the ocean floor, people stopped saying she was unsinkable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. The next poet on our list, and the last, Lissa Perrin. Lissa is a retired psychotherapist with poems in several online and print journals, and she's another of our Crazy Wisdom coordinators. Lissa Perrin.
Thanks, David. I'm going to read a few poems which are generally short and which have been published sometime in the last year or so. The first two are companion pieces. Louise, it's 20 years since my mother died. When death finally took her, slow erosion had reshaped her body and washed loose some of her mind, leaving gullies and sinkholes where words and thoughts used to hold together. Still herself, only less so, she no longer worried about money, about me, about her weight. At 87 pounds, her bones were light as hollow driftwood. Only her hair was unchanged, still thick, dark, barely silvered. Sleep cradled her more and more until she dreamed her way home, her good death a final gift. And this one is called The Breath of Loss. Hers, shallow, ragged, soft, chest barely rising, silent, gone. Mine, stifled, strangled, denied, tight aching lungs, explosive, released. God's, cold, silent, empty, unchanging, indifferent to pain. The next one is called It's Said That How You Do One Thing. It's said that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So step gingerly on the wintry path, placing your boots precisely into frozen furrows of mud or onto snow-covered leaves. Use your walking stick judiciously. Let your cautious pace bring you to beauty and surprise. Slanting shafts of sunlight, orange splashes of bittersweet clinging to the vine, a sudden flash of crimson wing. And then the last two are on a lighter note. This is called Nursery School Revenge. Besides graham crackers, milk, and blue floor mats, I don't remember much about nursery school, except Mrs. Lapsaritis and a boy named Donnie. He was cute, with dark curly hair and deep brown eyes, just my type, as it turned out later, with dubious results. Handsome is as handsome does, Mom always said. Donnie was naughty. He liked to tease and pull hair. His meanest trick was to stuff his pockets full of sand, climb to the top of the slide, and throw it down on anyone who tried to challenge him by stepping on the ladder. Handsome is as handsome does, Mom always said. When Donnie stopped coming to school, Mrs. Lapsaritis said he'd been in a car accident. Donnie was in the hospital, so she made us paint pictures to cheer him up, like flowers or dogs with green grass, blue sky, and smiling suns. I liked to paint, but my picture was splotchy and messy on purpose. And then my last poem is Come to Play. Sometimes uninvited words come to play, showing up like family who don't knock. Delicacy and delicious like to slide through the door, slipping in the way smooth chocolate or butterscotch feel in my mouth, savored on my tongue. Sultry wants attention, cooled and shimmering like a red silk negligee on the floor beside the bed. Careless turns up to summon carouse and chaos, who invite heedless, headlong, and bedlam. Then those party crashers, precipitous and pandemonium barge in. When madcap and mischief materialize, I grab a cold one, crank up some tunes, and join the rumpus, dancing full tilt with ecstasy, exuberance, and rapture, giddy with glee in the heady hullabaloo. Thank you.
Thank you, Lissa, and thank you to all of our readers this evening. We've come to the end of the formal program, and we're going to go into an open mic now. And before we do that, I want to thank everyone who is joining us via YouTube, and thank you for watching, and we hope that you'll see us again sometime.